Welcome and thank you for attending. My name is Lisa Saldine and I'm a member of the study team. This is the first public meeting for the Vekol and Smith WASH's Watershed Plan environmental assessments and the first virtual meeting for Pinal County. There may be some glitches, so please bear with us. We will try to aid with any technical difficulties. To request any accommodations related to this meeting or materials, please contact Chris Wanamaker at 520-866-6010 or at christopher.wanamaker@pinal.gov. That's CHRISTOPHER WANAMAKER at pinal.gov. This information will also be on the screen later in the presentation. During today's meeting, members of the study team will be providing an overview of the study. Following the presentation, they will answer any questions. For today's meeting, we are using Zoom, or attendees can call in. Please keep your phones or computer audio on mute throughout the meeting. Attendees will be muted and video turned off. If you have any questions or comments, please enter them via the chat window in Zoom. The chat feature can be accessed in the menu settings. Questions or comments can be entered during the presentation or when we get to the question and answer session. You can add your name and email address at any time to the chat feature to be added to the study mailing list for project news and updates. You may also submit any questions, comments, photos, or sign up to join the study mailing list after the meeting through an online survey, via email, phone, or mail. More information on this will be provided during the presentation. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted on the Flood Control District's webpage. You can also find the project fact sheet and online comment form on the webpage at www.pinalcountyaz.gov/publicworks/flood control. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Wanamaker, the Assistant County Engineer with Pinal County, to begin our presentation.
The project manager on the county side for this project. And we've got a diverse team of individuals working on this project that I'd like to take the time to introduce. So from the NRCS, which is the National Resources Conservation Service, we have Dave Bayman, Todd Solom, Amy Humphrey, Jamila McCoy, and Tom Reese. And I believe a few of them are on the call today, and hopefully they can help us answer some questions if we get questions within their purview. Next slide, please. And our consulting team is also a diverse group of people. We have Reynold Kraft, who is the main project manager from Helm. We have Brian Schalk from Helm as well. He's the senior project engineer. We have John Griffin from EPG. He's our landscape architect that's going to help us with this project. We have Mickey Siegel, who's our environmental consultant, and you already met Lisa Saldine, who is helping us with the public involvement. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the background of this study and how we got to where we are today. If you live in the area, you're probably familiar with the Hurricane Rosa storm event that happened in 2008. Not only was there extensive flooding throughout the state, but Hidden Valley was hit particularly hard as well. Almost 3.5 inches of rain fell within an 18-hour period. Floodwaters forced the shutdown of many roads, causing significant damage, which took Pinal County maintenance crews several months to repair. We also estimated that flooding significantly affected at least 20 homes and forced the closure of the Southern Dunes Golf Course, as well as many other businesses in the area. Several vehicles were also photographed stuck in flooded washes, and the local irrigation district reported that their canal was breached in several locations. In total, we recorded at least 48 damage sites that had significant flood damage. Soon after the storm event, Pinal County staff began working to put together an effort to study and help look for solutions to this flooding. There were no regional studies done in the past for this area, and there really wasn't any sort of studies done at all, even at a local scale. The existing drainage infrastructure in the area is either non-existent, undersized, or discontinuous at best. The watersheds affecting Hidden Valley and the communities and those living in the area are complex, and there are many stakeholders in the area that have a stake in how we do this project and what sorts of outcomes we get from this study. These stakeholders include utility providers, the irrigation districts, businesses, and utility companies. So Pinal County, we decided to tackle this problem by performing a watershed planning and environmental assessment study. And we felt that this was the best way to position ourselves to obtain federal funding to construct infrastructure in the future. And this public meeting that you're attending right now is the first of many public meetings that we will have to have throughout this planning process. Now, before I move on to the next slides, I'd like to bring up a map to show everybody the study area, and so that we can get ourselves oriented with what we're looking at. So let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. All right, so I got a map here. Let's see here. Hopefully everyone can see that. We've got the Vekol watershed here on the west and the Smith Wash watershed on the east. And for some context, we have Interstate 8 that runs right through the middle of the two. And we've got Highway 84, State Route 347 up through Maricopa. We can go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. We have the Nissan Proving Grounds to the east. The primary water courses through this study area are the Vekol Wash, which is over here on the west here, and then the Smith Wash, which is mainly a constructed channel through the center part of this watershed, and then comes over through the Ak-Chin, where it then meets with Vekol Wash. There was a comment earlier to point out a specific area. I think it was Miller and Barberry, so I've gone ahead and pinpointed that right here. So this road here is Miller Road, and Barberry is right here. With that, there is extensive flooding that we know that occurs along this road, and you could see lots of vegetation at Warren Road and Miller Road, and that's indicative of flooding. I'm going to go ahead and turn on flooding issues. So these are known flooding complaints that we've collected mostly from that 2018 Hurricane Rosa storm event, but there are others, and you can see they're numerous throughout the community, mostly where the residences are, the single-family homes. And then I'd also like to show a couple of flood photos. Of course, we have hundreds of photos, but I went ahead and just want to show a couple. So here's the channel along 347 at Papago Road. And you can see it's almost flowing full, and this was on October 2nd, 2018. Vekol Wash at Ralston is another good one. This was a photo we took from our drone, and you can't even see the road because it's completely underwater. This is Ralston Road here, running north to south, and we're looking west down upstream along Vekol Wash. And you can see, if you can see real closely here, the floodwaters went up over the banks as well. Here is Vekol Wash at, or actually this is not Vekol Wash, this is some overland flooding along Warren Road at, Vekol Wash is right here on the other side of this bank. Okay. this is the Vekol wash at Val Vista. We have the road closed, and you can see how high that water got and how far that is on the other side. It's pretty significant. Here's some roadway flooding here at this intersection of Amarillo Valley Road and Lewis Johnson Road. Amarillo Valley Road and Barnes Road there. Century and Garnett. This is kind of after the storm, but you can see there's a vehicle there that got stuck. It was immobilized. So, and we saw several of these all throughout the area. This is just one example. Let's see here. I think that was all. Oh, over here in the Vekol watershed, we have a nice photo of Bolin Road underwater. If you can believe that's a road, but it's also under several feet of water. So I didn't want to spend too much time going through a bunch of photos because, like I said, I have a whole bunch, but I just wanted to show that for some context. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here and pass it over to Reynold to talk about the project purpose and need.
Thanks, Chris. We could get the PowerPoint back up. All right. Hi, my name is Reynold Kraft. I'm the project manager on the consultant side of the project team. I'm going to start talking a little bit about the NRCS process. And first and foremost is the purpose and need. As part of the NRCS process, we have to define what our purpose and need of the need is of the study. This is kind of our guiding light that we use that helps define what our scoping will be, what our alternatives will be, and eventually what our watershed plan environmental assessment has to address. And a part of this, as large as Chris has mentioned, our purpose is to mitigate flooding. And for purposes of NRCS, a lot of this can be related to any types of flooding. Specifically for us, it's agricultural operations. Does it damage crops? Does it inhibit the ability of farmers to continue like with their operations? Does the flooding affect residents? Which it does. Chris has shown pictures of extensive flooding throughout the area. And mobility. Again, it's if this inhibits the ability for anyone to move around in the area, this again is something that needs to be mitigated by this study. In general, this project is going to create a comprehensive and regional study for which there has not been done or performed in the area. And a part of this, we need to identify not just flood hazards, but also make considerations for environmental impacts or any type of resource concerns that you or anyone else or the stakeholders may have in the area. And based on this input, we can develop mitigation alternatives, which would eventually select a preferred alternative that will move forward with in the study and eventually design and construction. But the first step is creating this Plan EA, and that will provide a pathway for federal dollars to fund both design of our preferred alternative solution and the construction of that preferred alternative solution. Just to kind of give you an idea, the two funding programs we're looking at is the first one is the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program, the WFPO, that has roughly about $150 million that are funded annually to that program, as well as the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP, which has approximately about $300 million that are funded to it. And there are funding the funding opportunities come up twice a year. The first one for the flood prevention comes up typically around summer, and then the Regional Conservation Partnership Program occurs, roughly about the end of the year. Next slide. Moving on in the NRCS process, we're now in kind of what is known as the scoping phase, where we're basically, it's data collection. So we're collecting any available data, related to anything. Could be cultural, could be biological, and flood hazards. For what we can't collect, we actually have to assess. So we've probably spent the past 8-9 months doing an extensive flood analysis of the area, and we're getting close to completing that model. It's a very large model, but it definitely defines exactly where a lot of these flood hazards may be. Also, a part of this scoping phase, we need to go to you, the public, which is why we're here today, to gather information from both the residents, the people who work there, and the stakeholders of what the flood hazards are, how you define them, plus any other resource concerns that you may have for the area. Once we have that data, then we move on to the alternative formulation and evaluation. We'll probably develop several alternatives, several types of solutions that will address the purpose and need of our project. A lot of these alternatives will be kicked out due to they're just not feasible. Some of the projects just may be cost prohibitive, or they're ugly, or they're going to look like the LA River. A lot of people do not want that. So they will just be eliminated pretty much from the beginning, and we won't do much analysis on them because we know that would just be a waste of time. But there will be a few that get, that will be selected that will move forward to additional analysis. We'll develop a cost benefit analysis where basically we have to show the benefits of the project exceed the cost of building it. In addition to that process, we have to look at what the environmental consequences are of those improvements. And on top of that, there may be a potential that we could actually enhance or make better a resource concern that may be unaffected by our improvement, but since we have the opportunity, we can actually improve. And once we finally have gone through the analysis, we'll come back to the public again, and we'll ask for your input. We hope to do this in person so we can present to you what they look like, and you can look at them, digest them, and provide your comments on them. Next slide. Go before. There we go. During this process, we'll have to consult with several federal groups. The first being the tribes in the area, the Ak-Chin and both the Gila River Indian community that both exist in our watersheds, both our Plan EA watersheds. And as well as we're required to converse with both Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to ensure that we're not impacting any ongoing operations or anything they have going on in the area, or if there's any concerns they may have with what we're doing. And finally, once we have all that information after we consulted with everyone and mainly consulted with the public and stakeholders, we'll develop our watershed plan and environmental assessment. This will largely be an NRCS format, which has already been prescribed to us for easy review for them. We'll first develop a primary. We hope to have that around the first of the year, which that will go for review by the stakeholders, by the local agencies like City of Maricopa and of course Pinal County, and local state NRCS review. once we incorporate those comments in, address them, we will create a draft Plan EA, which will then go to national, to the NRCS headquarters. This is the stage where it will be available for public review, for you, the public, or any of the stakeholders to, again, make any comments that you wish to make on the document before it becomes final. Once we have all those comments, then we'll actually have a final document, which will be approved first by Pinal County, and then go on to be approved by NRCS, and that will become federally approved and become a public document for which we can use to get federal funding. Next slide. So specifically, while we're here today, we're focusing on the scoping phase. And as I mentioned before, we are in the process of gathering information to basically define the project, put it in context of how we need to develop these alternatives. So as I said before, we obtained available resource data. We perform the assessments or analyses that we need to fill any gaps in our information, such as defining the flood hazards. And then, of course, we're now coming to you to engage the public and stakeholders to get your sense of what the resource concerns and flood hazards are for your area. And as I said, this will, define basically the environmental context that we'll use to create our mitigation alternatives. I also included a graphic on the screen kind of showing a quick layout of our schedule. So as you can see right here, summer 2020, we're in data collection, we're having our first public meeting, and we're performing our flood hazard analysis. So as we move into fall, of course, we're going to start looking at alternatives. We'll have our second meeting where you'll be able to look at these alternatives, and then we'll decide on a preferred alternative. Then by the first of the year, we'll have our preliminary draft Plan EAs. It'll be moving through our review process. And then finally, by the end of spring, early summer, we should have a final approved, this is our current plans to have an approved Plan EA for which to seek funding for design and hopefully eventually construction. Next slide. To be a little more specific to the Watershed Plan environmental assessments that we are performing 2 Plan EAs. As Chris mentioned, these are related to a Vekol wash and Smith wash. The reason for these 2 studies is because we are only allowed a limitation size, like area size of 250,000 acres. If we combine these areas, it would exceed that amount, and it would exceed the criteria of the program. Since we are, and this is largely due because we are seeking potential funding for flood prevention. There are other components to these watershed plan assessments that do not adhere to that limitation, but since we are seeking flood hazard prevention dollars, we are bound by the 250, which is why we have 2 EAs. That being said, we are performing these concurrently. So they're basically one study, but we'll be producing 2 separate documents at the end, which each with their both their individual alternatives and solutions and preferred alternatives that we will eventually select and present to you. Next slide. So the first is Vekol wash. So Chris kind of laid it out a little bit, showing Vekol wash as it originates, south of Interstate 8 and flows north, and eventually flows into Pinal County at roughly Haley Hills, as you see on the graphic. And and then flows north and then drains to the Santa Cruz wash, which drains to the Gila River. The dividing line between these two studies is basically, if you look in the south, it's the tabletop mountains that if you're on I-8 and you drive through them, they're pretty obvious. And then once Vekol Wash passes through from Maricopa into Pinal County, Vekol Wash kind of becomes the dividing line between the two. Next slide. So as we see here, Smith Wash Plan EA is basically to the east, defined as, you know, with the tabletop mountains on now the west side, and Vekol Wash in the north on the west side. It drains to Vekol Wash itself just before it reaches SR 238. And as Chris mentioned, Smith Wash, some of you may not have known that it was a wash, since it's not really a natural wash. It's basically been constructed over time by several of the landowners, ADOT, everyone else who's kind of operated in the area. But it has been defined as a wash for the area. Next slide. Now I've kind of gone over the Plan EAs. I just kind of wanted everyone to know, moving for the future of the project, the Plan EA is really just the first step. This is actually a long-term project, mainly because we're going to be creating solutions, alternatives that are going to be extensive throughout the area. It's going to take a long time to construct. It's going to take a bit of effort. A lot of this may include easement and property acquisition, depending on the type of solution that becomes preferred, and of course available funding. No funding is unlimited. And that goes for both local and the federal level. Now, knowing that this is a long-term project, we have actually kicked around internally interim solutions that maybe we partially rebuild, or sorry, not rebuild, but build a solution that may not require property acquisition, that may be within current budgets, that will actually increase flood protection for maybe areas that are at extreme risk. And as well as there's developers interested in the area, and we can have them develop portions of the overall plan without the use of local and federal dollars. Next slide. And now we come full circle back to you, the public, and this is what we need from you. As you can see, there is a sample form on the right side of the screen that we are allowing people to comment on. But basically what we're looking for is things that kind of go back to the purpose and need that I discussed earlier about resolving flood issues. So impacts from flooding, basically how it impacts agricultural activity, how it impacts maybe your homes, how it impacts transportation, your ability to move around the watershed. And of course, maybe loss of income. Maybe you've been trapped in your home for a couple of days, you couldn't get to your place of employment, and that became lost wages. Those are all things that can translate into what we call a benefit that can be used as a way to offset the cost of the project and get more federal dollars. Other concerns are, say, there's about the environment, mainly like air, water quality. I mean, obviously we probably see more dust storms in that area. I know when I've driven down to Tucson, I've been caught in a few of those things. It has a lot to do with loss of vegetation, which translates into both wildlife and the vegetation that I see on the screen. But for both wildlife and vegetation, that's just maybe not just, I consider that maybe loss of native vegetation, but that also maybe maybe there's an invasive species of either of those that you may be concerned about that we should probably know about. Erosion, that's another sign of obviously loss of vegetation, or sedimentation, anything that you may observe, how the watershed is somewhat degraded because there is a missing resource. But these are all ideas for you to come up with in terms of what you would classify as a resource concern. And and as I show, like other concerns here, there's tribal and cultural. This maybe for you, maybe there is something historical in the area that may not be on the historical register, but the community feels that it needs to be protected. So things like that we would like to know about. Recreation, we've talked to Pinal County Parks. They've mentioned that they are planning on installing trailheads and campgrounds up by the Palo Verde Mountains, and eventually extend more trails further south. These are things that we would like to know about as well. Scenic areas, what do you like to see? What's your view shed? What do you want? If these solutions are put in the ground, what would you basically like to see? And I just threw this into the slide too. It's like NRCS has a list of possible concerns. A lot of them don't really apply to us. There's some coastal stuff in there, but basically, if you don't know if what you have is a concern or not, we could post it on the website if needed. But basically, I will just say, if you feel it's a concern, just make the comment. We'll decide whether if it makes sense or not. But please make the comment. Next slide. Next steps. So generally, we like to kind of give kind of like a wide opening for everyone to kind of think about these concerns. So we set the comment period for 45 days, which gives us a deadline of September 19th. We'll continue to accept comments after this deadline, but we're not obligated to basically respond to them. But we will if we need to, if you come up with a basically a major concern that we need to address. And just to let everyone know again, just to reiterate, we haven't set a date yet, but our next public meeting is probably going to be late fall, and that's going to be going over our flood hazard results plus our alternatives that we had analyzed. Next slide. Okay. So yeah, to subscribe news and information on the study, provide your name and email address. So our public involvement consultant has basically given us an ability to do a on-site polling per se. So if you go, obviously it says join the web, go to pollev.com. If you enter input, you have to spell it out as it shows on the screen. You should be able to respond that way. Also, if you join by text, you text to 2233 and input text all caps, and you should be able to text your message or comment that way. Next slide.
Ronald, can we stay on this slide for just a minute so
Yeah.
that way people have a chance to
Yeah, no, that's
respond?
fine.
Thanks.
Just let me know when I need to continue on, or if you want to take over.
No, let's just give it a minute so people can
Okay.
either join via the web or join by text. So again, if you'd like to subscribe to news and information on this study, You can submit it via the poll, so you can text input to 2233, or you can join via the web at pollev.com and enter input. You can also share your name and email address in the chat pod as well, and we will add you to the distribution list. So.
And we have this slide here is just showing our contact info and where to submit comments. Of course, our project contact, as Lisa mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is Chris Wanamaker, the Assistant County Engineer and Flood Control District Manager. We also have a website there. If you go to pinalcountyaz.gov/publicworks/flood control, you will have the ability to look at project updates and be able to get a downloadable form of our comments, as well as you see here, the online comment form for our SurveyMonkey, which is www.surveymonkey.com/r/Vekol and Smith. So it's covering it up. Smith washes. We'll leave this screen up for another minute to give you time to write things down. And just to let everyone know, we will be posting this this presentation on YouTube. Hopefully Lisa can give us information to where that will be. If we don't have that right away, we could post that on the website.
Hey, this is Chris. Yeah, so we're going to post it on the Pinal County's YouTube page, and also link to it from our website there. That's the Public Works/Flood Control website. So it'll be posted there for viewing, as well as the county YouTube page.
Great, thank you guys. I think, are we ready to move on to our question and answer portion? Wonderful. So one of the questions that we received is just wanting a clarification related to the dates in the schedule for the winter and spring. Is it, it's 2021, not 2022? Chris or Reynolds?
Let's see here. Well, so the study will be complete in the spring of 2021. So a little less than a year from now, we expect to have the study complete.
Great, thank you. And one of the common questions, it seems that we've been getting is, when are we going to see something be built after this study has been done?
All right, yeah, that's a great question. So this watershed planning process is typically an 18 months to 24 months process, which we're already several months into. And as I just mentioned, you know, next spring, which is a little less than a year from now, we plan to have the study wrapped up. And then it's possible that we could meet the deadline for the next funding round for design. If we can get some design dollars, we can go through a 1 year to 18-month design phase. And then after that, we could possibly be ready for construction. So the soonest we could probably see something built, assuming we have a good alternative and the dollars are right and the project makes sense and we have support from leadership, the soonest we could have something built is probably 3 to 4 years from now, from today. Of course, there's a lot of things that have to go correct for that to happen. But we do this watershed plan. It's the first step. It's going to set us up for potentially decades of projects. We could keep doing more and more projects based on these plans and the decisions we make today. It is a long-term thing, like Reynold mentioned earlier. So, but again, the soonest we could probably see a project, something actually built, is probably around 3 to 4 years from now.
Great, thank you. And again, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to write them in the chat. We did get another question. Overall, how eye-opening has the flood of 2018 opened up unknown issues?
Well, that's another good question, and I'd say for us and my staff with flood control, it was fairly eye-opening, because up until the 2018 storm, most of the flood events in this area were very localized and just not as significant. And so we actually had in our 5-year plan to do a study for this area, but after the 2018 storm event, we moved that study up in the priority list and started it as soon as we could, because we knew how important it was to get something done in this area. So it definitely it was eye-opening. You know, we always knew there were probably issues here, but that storm definitely highlighted it for us, and for the Public Works Department, because again, they spent months cleaning up the roads after that storm. So it was quite an event for sure.
Great, thanks, Chris. Another question that we've received: are we currently in a floodplain and need flood insurance? Will this improvement after completion now put us in a floodplain, and will we need flood insurance?
All right, another good question. So as of right now, when you talk about flood insurance, you're talking about the FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency, floodplain maps. So the only FEMA floodplains that exist in this area is along Vekol Wash, and then there's some within the city of Maricopa as well. And so everyone, if you don't live on the Vekol Wash, you're not going to be in a FEMA floodplain, and so there's no flood insurance requirement. Now, with this study, there is no intent to change the maps and put people in a floodplain and require flood insurance. That's not the intent, and that's not the goal. And certainly, with any project that we construct, let's say it's a channel, a basin, or some sort of other project, that would have a benefit of removing floodplain or removing flood risk from people. But like I said, most of this area is currently not mapped as being a floodplain on the federal flood insurance rate maps. And so that's not going to change with this project. Unless you're on the Vekol Wash, then you may be in the floodplain now, but that won't change either, because this is not a floodplain mapping study. That's not the goal. So.
Thank you. Another question. This project has overlap with the City of Maricopa Heritage District Study. Is it intended to supersede the Heritage District Study?
Yeah, so there is some overlap, but no, this study is not going to supersede that study. And so if you're concerned about the floodplains there, as I imagine, I think that's kind of where this question is coming from, this study will not affect or change that Heritage District study that's happening. And this is a watershed planning study, and will not affect those remapping studies that are going on with the city, like the Heritage District study.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that we got is, how do we get and send in our comments?
All right, yeah, you can either email them directly to me. My email should be there on the screen, or you can go to the SurveyMonkey online comment form, and it's basically an online form that you fill out, and when you hit the submit button, it comes to us. Or you can go to our website, pinalcountyaz.gov/publicworks/flood control. Links to SurveyMonkey is on there, and you can also download a PDF form that you can print out and mail. You can mail it to me. I don't think we have our mailing address on there, but I can type it in the chat here. You can mail it to me, or you can scan and email it to me. So we'll be taking comments through multiple means. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get information to us. So.
And I also wanted to add, we're also taking photos. So if you'd like to share some photos with us of any issues you've experienced. Feel free to share any copies with those, and you'll be able to, on the online comment form, actually upload them into that as well. So another comment that we've received is, will the Esri GIS shapefiles be available, or the Google Earth KMZ file you are using so the detail is shared?
Yeah, good question. And actually, we had intended to make these Google Earth files, the ones that I was showing here, available for download on our county website. I was going to add that to the website later. And also, if you're looking for the GIS data, you can just email me, and I can just email it back to you, since most people don't have that software. But I was going to we are intending to make the Google Earth data available for download on the website. It may take a couple days to get on there, but that's the intent. And again, email me and I can get you the GIS data if you want.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question that we've received. There has been talk about annexing Hidden Valley to either Buckeye in the past or the city of Maricopa. How will this affect this plan? What about the proposed freeway through this area? There's also talk out there that a new well is being drilled for 30 homes. Will this affect the drilling of this new well? And are these 30 homes existing of new builds?
All right, well, there's a lot to that question. So the first one for the well for the 30 homes, I had heard something about that, but this study won't or shouldn't affect that, what's going on with that. I believe wells are permitted through the State Department of Water Resources. At least us flood control, we don't have much to do with wells. And this study shouldn't have any effect on that. To the question on annexation, one of the stakeholders in this study is the city of Maricopa. And so they're going to be informed and involved in the study. And of course, if there is annexations, our plan is just to continue the study, and things may or may not change with a potential annexation. I hadn't heard that Buckeye was planning to annex anything. That's interesting. I may have to look into that. So I don't know anything about that. What was the third question there? I'm sorry.
About a proposed freeway through the area?
Yeah, you're talking about Interstate 11. So one of the stakeholders that will be involving in this process is ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation. And also in our county public works department, we have some transportation planners that are well involved with the Interstate 11 project, and they're going to be involved in this as well. And there may be opportunities to jointly solve some problems, because with any roadway or freeway project, they have to address drainage with that project, and usually with giant freeways, there's giant channels and giant infrastructure, large infrastructure, and so there may be opportunities to partner and do things together. And also with the freeway project, they usually need a lot of dirt, because the freeways are raised up pretty high oftentimes. So, and the best place to get dirt is places where we're planning to build channels or basins. So again, there's going to be opportunities, and they will be involved. They are a stakeholder in this project.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to note that Alex has posted up the mailing address for Chris in the chat. So if you were looking for that, it is there. Thanks, Alex. Another question that we received is, will road conditions be improved, and will dust control be in effect?
So that road conditions and dust related to roads is really a function of the Public Works Department. So Pinal County Public Works is part of this study in terms of their partner, but this project is not really a roadway project. We are looking mostly at flooding and resource concerns. Dust is a resource consideration that we're going to be looking at, and if there's a way to address that with a project that also addresses flooding, that's certainly something we're going to look at. The more benefits we can get out of a project, the better the project is going to be seen at a national level when we're trying to get funding. Roadway improvements. So part of the study, as Randall mentioned, is looking at mobility and access. And so we know, and you guys know because you live out there, there's a lot of places that get cut off during a storm or a flood event because there's no culverts, no bridges. And so part of this project is looking at access. And we want to make sure if there's a way we can build something that improves access for people, that's also something we want to do. And because that ties right into loss of income, emergency services access, stuff like that. So that is a consideration of this project.
Great. And then there was a follow-up to one of the last questions related to the wells and the new housing. I understand the state deals with the well, but if there are new housing builds that will affect any washes that need to be diverted, which will affect the water flow.
Yeah, so if they're building homes, of course they have to get permits through the county. If it's 30 homes, then that would be a subdivision, and they have to go through the county's subdivision development process, which that includes dealing with drainage. That's a significant part of the subdivision planning process. They have to not only provide on-site retention of runoff, which is the purpose of that is to offset any additional runoff created by adding rooftops and pavements. And they also have to deal with the offsite runoff. So runoff like washes and things coming to and through their property. And there's a number of ways that they can handle that. They can leave it natural and just have setbacks for buildings, or they can construct channels, or there's a number of options. But they do have to come through the county's development review process. Now, if it's a single lot deal where they're building one home at a time type of thing, maybe it's not a subdivision, those still have to come through the county's review process. And but at that point it's at the building permit level. And so we do review each building permit that comes in, and there are restrictions and regulations with regards to washes and how they have to maintain drainage on their property, provide setbacks, and make sure they elevate homes up to make sure they're not going to flood. But there are limitations to what we can do on the single lot level. We are aware of that. And so not related to this project, but the county, we are working on some new drainage regulations to help in the future deal with some of the problems that in the past have been caused by single lot residential development. But that's really a separate discussion. There'll be separate public meetings for that drainage ordinance, drainage regulation update. Okay.
Thanks, Chris. And then there was another follow-up to that as you were responding. However, the roads are currently used as flood control. The roadworks filled in all the culverts 2 years ago, trying to divert all the water to Vekol. Will this project eliminate road flooding?
Yeah, so one thing this project is looking at is looking at road flooding, because going back to what I said earlier about access and mobility. So we don't want roads to be channels, because they're not. The drainage should be in a separate facility, so you should have a road and a channel as two separate pieces of infrastructure, because you want safe driving and flooding off of people's property. So there may be opportunities to construct channels or other infrastructure adjacent to or parallel to roadways. And we will be making recommendations to the County Public Works Department for potential road improvements. Flood control district, we don't typically do road improvements. We really can't. We have to build flood control infrastructure. But we can make recommendations to our Public Works Department on that. And what Public Works is doing, what you may be referring to and what you're seeing out there, they are trying to make road improvements so that the roads don't flood. I don't know if they've removed culverts. it's possible they did that. They don't always run everything by us, but certainly we want to make sure that what they do doesn't make flooding worse. And that's going to be part of this project, is looking at the transportation network and how can we improve access for people's properties. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One last question that we have, again, if you do have any other questions, feel free to type them into the chat, but we've heard some concerns about wanting to know what's going to be done and concerned about what might be built next to somebody's house, you know, concerned that maybe it's going to be a concrete channel. So could you guys speak a little bit more about that and what's going to be done?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, our approach to flood mitigation, flood management is not necessarily to build concrete channels or anything in specific. What we're trying to do, especially with this study, is we want to look for what we call context-sensitive solutions that not only respect the character of the area, but take into account the concerns of the community and the environmental concerns. And so a concrete channel may not necessarily do that. You might actually be able to achieve better flood mitigation results using a different solution. Concrete can be kind of expensive. It's kind of ugly, you know, and it actually can speed up the water and cause other problems. And so, you know, we are looking at, and that's why we have environmental people on our team and a landscape architect as well, because we are looking for solutions that fit better with the environment and fit better with the community, that addresses not just flooding, but other concerns as well. And like I said earlier, if we can maximize the amount of resource concerns that we can address with a project, that's going to make it a lot easier to get that project funded. So some examples of things that we could construct besides this typical channels and basins, you know, there are things like check dams, which are very small structures that are usually built in or near washes. And when I talk about small check dams, you know, we would need to build a couple dozen of these to have any sort of applicable benefit along the wash. Or we could build things like bioswales, which is basically channels that have vegetation in them, as opposed to a perfectly clean channel. Maybe a vegetation line channel would have the effect of slowing down runoff. We could also provide habitat for wildlife and things like that. So that's something that we might want to look at for certain areas. And of course, there's a whole host of other types of solutions that fit within that context.
Great, thanks. And then we did receive a comment within a question about those maps that you were talking about posting, Chris, on the web with Google. Will they be able to show specific streets?
So with the Google Earth files, it just opens in Google Earth, which is a free program available from Google, and Google Earth has streets on it. But if you're asking about a specific map, we can create a map that has streets on it. I guess I can go that route. We can create a separate map that has streets and other information, because I know a lot of people are interested in finding out, you know, where their house is or where their property is in relation to the study boundary. So we can go ahead and create something like that and put it on the website as well.
Great, thank you. We've got another question that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Is the study actively coordinating with the Auction Indian community as a stakeholder?
We will be with them. So the next steps will be stakeholder meetings and stakeholder involvement. And so they should know about this study, because I'm actually working with the Auction on a different project. And I've mentioned this to them, but we haven't like sat down and done any detailed discussions yet, but that is to come for sure.
Alrighty, great, thank you. Well, that wraps up all of the questions that we've received so far. So Chris, I'll turn it to you for closing remarks, but the team will still be online. So if you do continue to have questions or comments, please feel free to write them into the chat box.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for your time this evening. I know you probably have maybe better things to do, like, you know, spend time with the family, eat dinner or whatever. So I appreciate it. And your comments are also very valuable. It helps us direct the direction, you know, drive the direction of the project and help us, you know, what are the concerns of the residents. So again, if you have comments, you can, my email address is there. You can call me, you can email your comments to me, or of course fill out the forms. So again, thank you. And we'll be on, we're going to go ahead and stay on this call till 7 o'clock because that's what was advertised. So thank you.
Chris and Reynolds, we did receive another question. Will you pile rocks to build check dams?
All right. Yeah, so good question, because I was talking about check dams earlier. So typically what I've seen for check dams is they use rocks that are from the area. And I don't know if there's enough rocks in this area. I haven't physically been to some of these washes, but ideally we would use material that's sourced nearby. We could use rocks to build these check dams. We wouldn't necessarily want to use blocks or any sort of concrete because it gets expensive, plus probably wouldn't look very good either. But we'll have to see how that alternative pans out and whether or not it's viable, because you can only use that in certain situations. The flows can't be too high. Like, we certainly wouldn't want to use check dams on the Vekol wash. It's just too much flow. Any check dam we construct would just be blown out. So there has to be a certain situation and there has to be certain benefits, but I think the intent would be to use native material if available, and if not, we would get rocks, or just like we would do with riprap, which is rocks. That's what we would probably do. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, we had a follow-up to that.
Yes.
Any support to plant trees, bushes, and grasses to sink water in our properties?
Okay, yeah. So what you're talking about is landscaping. So that's kind of an interesting thing, because when it comes to flood control projects, we typically don't do landscaping. We only do that which is necessary for soil stabilization. Now, with that said, because this project will be an NRCS project, it's certainly possible there will be landscaping added, because as you said, there's benefits to groundwater and to habitat, and well, there's a variety of benefits, and so that's certainly a possibility, depending on the specifics of what project alternatives we choose, and what project alternatives are deemed viable, and depending on the area. So yeah, we certainly want to make things that look nice, that function in the context of the goals we're trying to achieve, which is flood mitigation and addressing resource concerns, such as, you know, erosion, sedimentation, habitat loss, and aesthetics is another thing, how things look. So that can be a part of it, of this type of project with what we're doing. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, we had a follow-up. What habitats are being promoted for environmental purposes?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know that I have the answer to that. I'm not a biologist or animal expert. Is there, Reynolds, do you have that information about what sorts of habitat and animals and stuff are part of this area?
I do not, but do we have somebody from EPG on the line that can speak to it? or they've already, let me just check to see who's on our participant list. Let's see, message him. John's on the line. Can you...
That's why we hire experts to help, because as part of the study, they're going to be looking at that stuff as, you know, what habitat's already out there, what endangered species are in the area, if any, that need to be protected. And in addition to endangered species, I think there's a list called threatened. I can't remember. It's an Arizona specific list of species that are they're not quite on the endangered species list, but they're threatened. And
yeah, they're threatened. Yes.
Yeah. So those are things that our consultant is definitely looking at. I don't have the specifics of what those things are. So it doesn't seem like they're on the call.
Yeah, he's not responding to me.
Okay, so that we'll have to get back to you on that. If you wanted to email me directly, I can get you that information after this meeting at some time.
We've received another question. In the public forum section of the meeting, residents were asked what they would like to see from this project. So my question is, will this project include beautifying areas such as trails, benches, outside recreation areas?
All right, good question. So those types of things would need to be done in conjunction with a project that addresses the primary resource concern, which is flood mitigation or flood prevention. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, if there's a way to do something that addresses flood mitigation, that also has a benefit to making the area look nicer and also has a recreational benefit, then that's something that definitely we want to do. Also earlier in the presentation, we talked a little bit about that we're working with the Palo Verde Regional Park team. I think I mentioned that. And so there's going to be opportunities, I'm sure, to do things that both address the goals of this study, which is flood prevention, and also help with those park improvements, whatever those improvements may be. So yeah, this we will be partnering with the park people, the park team on this project. Okay.
Thank you. Again, for everybody on the line, we'll be on for about 5 more minutes. So continue to share your questions or comments. Thank you. And also the comment submission and contact information remains on the screen. So just different ways you can reach out to Chris via email or phone, also our website where you can find the online comment form and other materials for the meeting, and where the recording for the meeting will also be. It's now 7 o'clock. Chris, any final words before we close?
I guess I'll just say, you know, thanks everyone. And if you stayed on this whole time, you know, thank you for that as well. I know it was a long meeting, but I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. So this ends tonight's meeting. Again, a recording will be up on the project website at pinalcountyaz.gov/publicworks/flood control, and comments can be submitted through September 19th. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a good night.